Hey guys, welcome back. After 10 years of waiting, the Halo TV series finally premiered yesterday with episode 1, Contact. Now before I go over all the Covenant stuff in this episode, I want to give you guys my general thoughts on the show. It was pretty good. I generally loved the atmosphere of this episode. It definitely looked and sounded like Halo, and it definitely looked like the producers were paying attention to the source material, despite what some articles might have said in the past. I think this show drives home for many Halo fans, including myself. It has good action sequences, it has interesting drama between the characters, and I like certain plot points in this show. Halsey and Parandowski, Miranda and Keyes, and so on and so forth. So with that out of the way, let's break down the first episode of the Halo TV series, titled Contact. The episode opens on a very familiar planet to most Halo lore fans, the planet of Madrigal. As I said in my previous trailer breakdown, Madrigal was a human planet first attacked by the Covenant and consequently glassed. After that, the survivors of the planet regrouped on the rubble, and following the glassing of the planet, the Kigyar leader Reth assembled an Ungoi army at the behest of the Prophet of Truth. But in the Silver Timeline, Madrigal is home to a number of insurrectionists hoping to break free from the UNSC. The particular insurrectionists that we encounter in this show are led by General Jin Ha, who is also the father of Quan Ha, one of the main characters of the show. Speaking of Quan, she and her friends venture out outside the insurrectionist base, who from my understanding are collecting some sort of drugs or narcotic agents specifically found on Madrigal. During this time, Quan ventures out to find a Covenant dig site. Scared, she runs off, and immediately her friends are gunned down by Covenant soldiers. And let's stop here. I did not imagine that the TV series would be this bloody this soon. I mean, I imagined it was going to be TV-14, but no, this is definitely TMA. We haven't seen this level of gore since the days of the Halo Evolution's motion comics. It's a welcome return as far as I'm concerned. But back on track, Quan alerts the insurrectionists using a flare, and her father rallies the insurrectionists to make a stand on what they assume was the UNSC. But those thoughts are quickly dashed aside as soon as they saw plasma fire and Quan alerting her father that the attackers are not UNSC. And boy was she correct, because soon after, the gate is suddenly exploded by Covenant plasma fire, and a lance of 20 Sangheili stormed the base. And before we continue, let's look at some of the Sangheili armor that we see in the show thus far. We definitely have a bunch of miners, but they seem to be wearing a different set of armor. This armor seems to be resembling more of the Arbiter from Halo 2 Anniversary, albeit with blue coloration. Now the Sangheili Major, on the other hand, that I'm a little mixed about. I like the body armor, but the helmet, it's a bit iffy for me. And look at the Major's shoulder. He seems to be wearing a different variation of the Covenant insignia, or it could be a symbol of his actual rank. It's probably the former, but it would be rather interesting to see an actual symbol of the Major rank. But anyway, let's continue. Just as the elites storm the base, we hear the iconic Wart Wart. Let me tell you, if you're a major Covenant fan like I am, you had to have grinned at that. And pleasantly, they say it a bunch during this battle sequence, which I definitely appreciate as a Sangheili nerd. One other note, I love how the Sangheili Major was able to ram through an armored car. It definitely shows how strong the Sangheili are, even in the core canon. And let's look at their plasma weapons. The plasma rifle looks pretty good to me. It's a bit more armored than we're accustomed to the original games, but I definitely dig it, especially seeing as it slaughters kids and civilians. Just as the Covenant forces begin to overwhelm the insurrectionists, we get Condor and drops off Master Chief and Silver Team. And they go to work in slaughtering the Sangheili. My favorite scene was when Vanek went all Vlad the Impaler on one Sangheili. I mean, damn. Moving on, as Quan is running for her life as the Spartans gun down the Sangheili, we are shown more gore as the battle continues. And when the fight is over and she sees her father still alive, a wounded Sangheili Major moves to kill Quan. But her father tries to save her, and the Major cuts him down with the energy sword, and it definitely shows a different light to the energy sword in Halo, let me tell you. But as Quan sees her father die before her eyes, and the Sangheili Major tries to kill her, Master Chief comes up and finishes him off. With the Covenant forces dead, Silver Team moves into the Covenant dig site where they find a Forerunner object. As Chief and Kai are inspecting the Forerunner object, a lone Sangheili warrior observes the whole affair. As Chief activates the Forerunner object, the room glows and the Sangheili warrior looks in astonishment. As Kai wakes up the Chief, the Sangheili takes the chance to escape and activates his active camouflage, which also has the classic sound. Even though this show isn't canon, you have to appreciate the level of detail they put in the sound design. But anyway, the Sangheili Major escapes the dig site while knocking out Quan Han and escaping through a Banshee. And that's pretty much the opening sequences right there. And I gotta be honest, I was really amazed by the action sequences here. The CGI for the Sangheili just look absolutely phenomenal. Sure, there were some hit and miss when it comes to the graphics on the weapons, but I can forgive that. Now, seeing as the rest of the show takes place on the UNSC side of things, let's move on to the final Covenant sequence, and what better final scene we could have in the pilot than within the holy city of High Charity. It's described as the Covenant Command Center, and it's in an unknown location. And on the outside views, you can definitely see there's a bunch of Covenant ships floating around, including a CAS-class assault carrier. I hope we see more of these ships in future episodes. And within the Holy City, we see the Anodyne Spirit, also known as the Forerunner Dreadnought, and it just looks absolutely stunning. And we can see a couple CCS-class battlecruisers, which also looks absolutely stunning. Now moving on to the actual scene, we have the Prophet of Mercy accompanied by Sangheili Honor Guards. Now for those of you who haven't seen the latest Silver debrief, the Prophet of Mercy is going to take a central role in the Halo TV series, as opposed to how he was treated in the core canon as basically a third wheel in the hierarchy. And here let's break down his opening scene. We have his retinue of Sangheili Honor Guards, but they seem to be wearing the same combat harness as the Sangheili Miners and the Majors in the opening sequence. While it's disappointing they don't have their ornate armor as we saw in Halo 2 Anniversary, this appearance isn't in fact non-canon. If you remember in Halo Wars, the Honor Guards accompanying the Prophet of Mercy and Ripa Mormi, they wore a standard red combat harness, and they carried the same staffs as we see here. While it's disappointing we don't have their usual Honor Guard armor, this is something I can live with. And let's look at the Prophet of Mercy's throne. It's a bit, squarish compared to what we saw in the actual core canon. And obviously, Mercy isn't wearing his ornate crown. Like I said, it's sad, but it's a change I can tolerate. Now as Truth enters the room of the Blessed One, Mercy waves off his guards to wait outside. That right there makes me wonder if Mercy and the other hierarchs don't want Maquis known to the rest of the Covenant. My assumption is that within the Silver Timeline, Mercy kept Maquis away from most Covenant in order to avoid any religious backlashes among the Sangheili and among the rest of the Covenant. But moving on, Mercy greets Maquis and again addresses her as the Blessed One, and says that the artifact found on Madrigal was exactly as she predicted. That quote right there has me scratching my head a lot on Maqui's role within the Covenant. How did she predict the artifact would be on Madrigal? The only thing we know thus far is that she's studying human books, not because they are people, but to give her knowledge of the enemy. During their conversation, Mercy refers to the Master Chief as the Kaidan Warrior. Now for those of you who don't know, Kaidan is the Sangheili word for leader, and is usually associated with the clan leaders on St. Helios. It would make sense for the Covenant to refer to Chief as a Kaidan warrior, seeing as he leads Silver Team, a quote-unquote clan in regard to Sangheili terminology. That is an Easter egg that I definitely appreciate as a Sangheili fan. And that pretty much wraps up the Covenant side of things. And the rest of the show pretty much goes on as pretty much most of you know. Master Chief takes Quan to Reach, Parandowski orders the Chief to kill Quan when she refuses to cooperate with the UNSC, and John disregarding those orders, pretty much becoming rogue. And during their trip to Reach, Master Chief finally reveals his face to Quan, signifying her trust, and the two work together to try to escape. And I don't know why, but Pablo Schreider absolutely kills it with the face reveal to Quan. And before you guys freak out about the Master Chief face reveal, we knew this was coming a mile away, and it's not like we've seen this before in the canon. Probably not in the games, but definitely in the books. But anyway, as Silver Team prevents the UNSC from boarding the Condor, Chief activates the artifact, and they escape from Reach. And that's the first episode of the TV series. Overall, I'm pretty satisfied with what we got thus far. Though the Quan Chief rogue element does have me scratching my head a bit, I'm willing to give the show a chance to see how the plot moves forward. For the most part, I dig the Covenant aesthetics. The armor for the Sangheili is a bit iffy for me, but it's something I can live with. And I definitely love Julian Bleach portraying the Prophet of Mercy. For those of you who don't know, Julian Bleach played Niccolo Machiavelli in the TV series Borgia, and he absolutely nailed it in this show, and I am definitely looking forward to seeing more of him portraying the Prophet. So all in all, I'll give episode 1 a 7.5 out of 10. A pretty solid start, not mind-blowing, but entertaining enough to get me invested in future episodes. But what did you guys think? What was your favorite scene? Who was your favorite character in the show? Let me know in the comments below. And until next time, guys, may the eyes of the prophets watch down upon you all. Victory to Clan and Kin, Covenant fans. Covenant Canon, out.